Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of I Am. I Am is a Catholic podcast in the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands. Here on I Am, we share on the coming Sunday's Gospel every week. Thank you for joining us.
Our Gospel for this week is taken from Matthew chapter 16 verses 13 to 20. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he put this question to his disciples: "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But you," he said, "who do you say I am?" Then Simon Peter spoke up and said, "You are Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Simon, son of Jonah, you are a blessed man, because it was no human agency that revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. So now I say to you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my community, and the gates of the underworld can never overpower it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he gave the disciples strict orders not to say to anyone that he was the Christ. The Gospel of the Lord.
So this is a special episode that will be featuring 4 special guests. Our guests attended World Youth Day 2023 in Lisbon, Portugal, and they just returned last week from the event. They will be sharing on this week's Gospel and also on their experiences at World Youth Day 2023. We have Desmond, Nicodemus, Lydia-Grace, and Adam. So without further ado, we will jump right into it and hear the sharings of our guests.
Hi everyone, my name is Desmond Aguilo. I am from the New Britain provinces and from the Morobe province. I had also attended the World Youth Day 2023 in Lisbon, Portugal. The event was from the 30th of July to the 6th of August. We returned last week Tuesday, which is the 15th of August. I attended the event under my position as a special director to the Catholic Youth Board of the Youth Commission of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands. Now, I will be sharing on this week's Gospel and also on my experience at the World Youth Day event. The passage that stood out to me in this Gospel reading is where Jesus asks his disciples, "Who do you say I am?" So after asking this question, Simon Peter answers to Jesus, "You are Christ, the Son of the living God." And then Jesus tells him, "You are a blessed man, and from this day forth your name shall be Peter. You will be the rock on which I will build my church." And then he goes on to give Peter keys to heaven and earth. Now, you see how Jesus asks the disciples who they think he is, and then all of them start answering, but it was Peter who answers correctly. And he says that you are Christ, the Son of the living God. He identifies Jesus as truly being the Son of God. It's only after Peter correctly identifies Jesus that Jesus does 2 things. One, he reveals to Peter who Peter is. You'll note that in the verse, they address Peter as his former name, Simon Peter, and then they address him according to his name, Peter, and not with Simon. That is to show the contrast about who Peter was and then who he became after Jesus revealed who he was to him. So the first thing that Jesus did for Peter was he revealed to Peter who Peter was. Said, "Peter, you are no longer Simon. You are Peter, and you are the rock on which I will build my church." And the second thing that he does after revealing to Peter who he is he blesses Peter. He gives Peter this immense power to have the keys to heaven and earth, and to have the power to decide for heaven and earth and to bind heaven and earth. It is only when Peter correctly identified Jesus that Jesus did these 2 things for him. It is only when we know and understand who Jesus and God are and who they are to our lives and to life in its whole mystery and expanse and in general, does our life truly come alive, and do we really come to understand who we are and what our lives are about. So that is to say that in order to discover who we are, we have to first come to God. We have to first come to Jesus. We have to know who they are. We have to know who Jesus is. We have to know who God is, because our faith correlates with our lives. You see, we say that God is this all-powerful, omniscient being that created all things. But how much do we believe in that? We still see a lot of confusion in the world today. We see a lot of people who are chasing the things of this world, the things of secular life, the things of the material world, living the materialistic life. We are so overburdened with the concerns of this life. About, as Jesus himself said, we are worried about where our clothes will come from or where our next meal will come from. We are worried about what people will think of us or what the world classifies us or labels us as. Here, I believe Jesus is telling us that this is not the way to find out who you are. This is not the way to know who you are. The only way to know who you are is to firstly know who I am, to know who God is, so that then, only then, after can you know who you are, because God created us. The Creator always knows what He creates something for. So God created us, so He Himself will know what we're truly about. He knows our purpose. He knows why He created us, what we were meant for, what we were created for. So in order to discover who you are, I believe this is the message in this gospel passage. In order to know who you are, you come to Jesus first. You need to know and believe and understand that Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus is God Himself made incarnate and became flesh, and that He came down to die for our sins because we are sinful people. There is such a thing as sin. Life does consist of sin and righteousness. We need to believe these things, these simple teachings of the Christian faith. So when we do believe in these things, we therefore see and understand who God and Jesus are. And when we understand who God and Jesus are, only then can we discover who we are and what we're about and what we were made for. So that's what this gospel passage is telling us. And if you see what happens after we discover who we are and find out who we really are, who God created us to be, blessings are poured forth. It was only when Saint Peter knew and understood that Jesus was the Son of God did Jesus reveal to him who He was. And who He was just something great. Peter, up until that point, did not know that he was going to be the first pope ever of the Catholic Church, that he was going to be given the powers of heaven and earth, that he was going to be the foundation on which the church stands, the Church of Christ, the Church of God stands. Peter didn't know these things. It was only when he understood who Jesus was that Jesus then revealed to him who He was and then blessed him. So in order to know who we are, we need to first understand and know who Jesus and God are. And then after that, the second thing that comes from it is a great act of grace where God blesses us and brings out our life to the full, or brings out the fullness of our lives by revealing to us who we are. Now, as for my sharing on my experiences at the World Youth Day event, there are two things that stood out to me. Now, apart from these two things, of course, the three messages given by Pope Francis throughout the whole event were wonderful. And I will be making a separate special episode on this podcast on I Am about the messages by the Pope to the young people of the world. And not just the young people, but the general audience of the Catholic faithful. So the two main things that stood out to me in my experience of the World Youth Day event were, firstly, is how the organizers organized the event. They organized this World Youth Day event in such a way that it would be a pilgrimage. And the pilgrimage would start from when the people, the attendees, the delegates left their countries and traveled to Lisbon. That's when the actual pilgrimage started, because before the actual leaving of their countries to fly to Lisbon, Portugal, there was a 10-day retreat that was given for everyone around the world to undertake. It was a 10-day retreat. And that 10-day retreat was to prepare us for the pilgrimage. So the moment you left your country and you were flying out, that's when your pilgrimage started. So the idea behind this World Youth Day event this year was for people to feel that they were journeying together with God towards self-discovery. And it's wonderful how that pilgrimage idea of traveling with Jesus and God to discovering yourself coincides well with this week's gospel of how God reveals to us who we are. And that's actually how I felt when I went to the event, that I was walking with Jesus, that I was walking with God, and that whatever was happening during the event was some form of self-discovery for me. So I was keeping an eye and an ear out for these things, of how God and Jesus would be revealing to me or telling me, helping me to discover who I am. So how they organized the event was what stood out to me. They designed it perfectly around the idea of a pilgrimage. So the pilgrimage continued. When you arrived in Lisbon, Portugal, it continued because they spread out all the countries to different areas of the city for their accommodation. So we all lived spread out across Lisbon city. Every day there were multiple events happening at multiple locations. So you picked which one. They created an application for your mobile phone so that you can look at the events and know what programs were. You can see the program for the day and know what events were happening at the day, and you picked which events you wanted to attend. And when you pick the event, you go to that location where the event was happening. So we were constantly moving. We were constantly having to travel and move around. And we did not know, we were all foreigners in this place. So we did not know where we were. So we had to ask directions from the people, the citizens or the residents in Lisbon City. We had to ask directions from each other to help each other find out where we were supposed to get to. We were calling each other. We were using Google Maps. So the whole idea of this event was to be a pilgrimage, and they designed it so well. So I have to take my hat off to the organizers of the World Youth Day Lisbon, Portugal 2023. Now, the second thing that stood out to me at the World Youth Day 2023 event was not a thing or an event, but it was rather a person. And this person is our very own Bishop Pedro Baquero. Bishop Pedro Baquero is the Bishop for Kerema Diocese, and he is also the Bishop Deputy of the Youth in the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands. Now, what stood out to me about Bishop Baquero was Bishop Baquero was walking amongst the young people in the event. He didn't stay separate. He wasn't dressed up in his vestments. He wasn't away from the young people. He was walking in and among the young people during the event. He was walking among the crowd. I actually recall one of the events. It was the welcoming ceremony of Pope Francis, and Bishop Baquero was not among the bishops. He was among the crowd, and he was in ordinary clothes and was walking around, and he actually sat down with the young people on the streets, and they were watching because it was so packed. The event was so packed that, and the main event was so packed that people were sitting about 2-3 kilometers away from the main event, watching from big screens that were put up by the organizers of the event. So Bishop Baquero was sitting amongst the young people from around the world, sitting with them and enjoying the event as it was unfolding. And I thought that was a rather wonderful thing. And also, Bishop Baquero did not leave us, the delegates of Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands, on our own. Bishop Baquero was always constantly checking up on us. He stepped in to help us out with whatever we needed, and he was also moving with us. He was coming and being with us throughout the event, and I thought that was just an amazing example of what it means to know who you are. You see, I feel like Bishop Baquero showed something great, and with the gospel, I think he showed, to me, it shows that Bishop knew who he was. He didn't have to put on a vestment to show that he was a bishop or a representative of Christ. He knew that he was a representative of Christ. He knew who he was. So that's why I saw that he was more happy being who he was, which is an ambassador of Christ, rather than who the world thought he was, or rather than who the world labels him as a bishop of the church. So I thought Bishop Baquero was definitely something that stood out to me for the event.
Me, I'm Nicodemus Nande. Me one play Catholic Diocese from Southern Highlands, Papua New Guinea. One am something me like serim now. I'm also one something me pilim lo ta me pinata dim disla warrior chidelo Lisbon. Okay, one plus something where me pina pilim lo kan time nuncio where man sit down close to lo poop in come work open in misa time. Man disla time me woli go silent, no ga talk or like misa am silent and run smooth straight. Them our words are respecting misa plor na house are respecting ma God na Jesus, Holy Spirit na Mama Maria. This plus straight and come so in time plus straight lo. This la world today time open misa been come up time. And one bla me be looking this la. Okay, narla me been looking lagan time ma popini come walk ma closing mess lo one bla hap lo solwara site man popi come no gan meeting or sem ma. Even if I'm down on the ground, our immigrant white, body broken white, emory white black clothes. This time meeting also money leading this la war logan emigam and also Jesus been leading all apostle na and been round outing dog this la logan poppy leading this la war na come logan man through gracia block God and pull up through them na emigam and this la time me black and amamas been kissing me. Or this la time poppy kana one poppy ma closing mess time.
Hi all, my name is Lydia-Grace Wickham and I'm from Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands. I'm currently 16 years old and attending year 11 in high school. I was also an attendee for this year's World Youth Day in Lisbon, Portugal, which I'll be sharing my experiences and my personal journey. Coming back to this week's Gospel, Matthew 16 verses 13 to 20, it speaks a lot about how Jesus gave authority rather than rules and regulations to his disciples to carry out his church. Coming back to verse 13, it talks about how Jesus asked his disciples how the people perceive him or who they think the Son of Man is. They gave multiple responses. They said that he was John the Baptist, that it was Elijah or Jeremiah or one of those prophets, but none of them mentioned Jesus. And this just shows us that not everybody knew who Jesus was at that time. Not everybody knew who the real Son of God was at that time. And this can be applied to our everyday life. We don't always need to be out there, like in the public, or we don't always need to be a big leader. You can start small. People will recognize you. Through God, people will recognize you. People will see that you are who you are. You are a great believer. You are a great person, and slowly people will come to recognize you for that. Now in verses 18 to 20, this is the part that I like because this is what talks about the authority. In verse 18, it actually reads, "And now I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and never will the powers of death overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you unbind on earth shall be unbound in heaven." In verse 18, it speaks about how God is giving the authority to Peter to carry on the church by telling him that, Peter, you are the rock, and I will build my church on this rock, and that you will be given the keys to the kingdom of heaven. And with this, it goes on to say that whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. This means that whatever Peter permits and doesn't permit on earth will be either permitted or not permitted in heaven. And this is a key role. This is the fact that Jesus gave this much trust, this much authority to Peter, goes to show how much Jesus trusted Peter, goes to show how much Jesus trusts in his disciples. And I think we can all learn from this. And rather than giving people rules all the time, we can give them authority, we can trust them. And by that, we can make ourselves trustworthy as well. We should work on making ourselves trustworthy as well. So people could also do that to us. Now, coming back to World Youth Day, something that I can most definitely bring back is trust. A lot of the times when we were out and about, we relied on Google Maps. We relied on our navigator, and we didn't give her rules. We just gave her authority, and she took us to where we needed to be. Another thing from that trust is we need to truly trust in God. We don't have to worry about what tomorrow holds for us. We just need to trust in God, and He will lead the way. God works for us, with us, and in us. He will eventually show you what you need to do, and He will give you opportunities if you truly trust in Him. I am looking forward to the next World Youth Day in South Korea, and I'm also hoping that more Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islander youths will join us and be a part of our next pilgrimage. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Awape. I am from Kagwa in Southern Highlands Province. Currently, I am the Youth Secretary of Nande Diocese, which I am helping Father Onesimus, the Youth Coordinator for Nande Diocese. Firstly, me like to thank you, Lord, giving me this period of time, Lord, sharing all experiences, blooming the World Youth Day, and also to say the Bible sharing, Peter declaration about Jesus. One of the touching texts which I read in the Gospel of Matthew is about the church. Specifically, it talks about God's promising and declaration in the eyes of the disciples that He will build His own church. I was one of the fortunate youth in many diocese attended the World Youth Day in Lisbon for the very first time of my life. I was very happy, and I'm very happy. And I want to say thank you very much to the Nande Diocese, our Bishop Donald Lipet, for everything that he has done for us, and all the parishioners for the great support and cares and kind for prayers, and not forgetting Father Onesimus for leading the team Nande to the World Youth Day. We were 5 of them in Nande Diocese who took part in the World Youth Day. Everything was just like a dream. I really enjoyed the festivals. I met friends all over the world. We exchanged gifts. We slept and ate together. We danced together. We smiled together. We prayed together and celebrated the Mass together with 4 princes with only one faith, one Catholic faith, the universal faith, despite different languages and cultures. We traveled from place to place together with our own flags. We jumped on the same train, same bus, and so on. We used the same bathrooms and restrooms. The people from Lisbon were so friendly. I loved the place. I can remember the best moments of the pilgrimage that took place at Campo da Graça. The day was very hot, but we really enjoyed the moments. I was really impressed to see the policemen and policewomen, the firefighters, the nurses, and the doctors for the best service and the services, the sacrifices to keep the whole youth day safe and well organized. The sad thing in my life is that I don't have enough time to know all the youth in the world. But I know for sure that one day we will be together in heaven, celebrating the Mass together with the real founder of the Catholic Church himself, as we did in Lisbon with the Holy Father. It is hard to forget Pope Francis saying that we all have a place in the church. In the church there is a room for everyone. And when there is not, please make sure that there is. Even for those who make mistakes, for those who fall and those who are going through difficulties. And this gives challenges to us as the youth animators in our own parishes and dioceses in Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands. Do we care for our youths? Do we love our own youths? Or do we love ourselves? Do we have rooms for every youth in the church? These are some of the questions we have to consider them by ourselves. Jesus really loves us and gave his only Catholic Church with the sacraments so that everyone has a place. World Youth Day Lisbon 2023 has ended, but not the echo of the words and message that Pope Francis left us in Portugal, the home of fraternity and the city of joy. We continue the whirlwind of emotions that will go in the history of the World Youth Day. See you all in South Korea for the next World Youth Day 2027 if the war doesn't end. God bless you all.
Thank you for joining us in this episode. If you want to hear more, please be sure to like and share this episode and also subscribe to our channel. Also hit the notification icon so that you can receive notifications of new episodes on our channel. Thank you, and we'll see you on the next one.